PLD PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
I'm really happy that we're just so timely on this that we are putting this out like almost 2 weeks after it came out. Number one, let's just call a spade a spade. Someone had to go get COVID.
That's what happened. I also went I had COVID, recovered-ish, and had a vacation planned, and then so everything is just completely out of whack in every way, shape, or form. That's because I'm also helping Maddie make his dream come true. Not really, but making his vision come true with Mission Impossible Declassified, which is something I wasn't supposed to be doing. I wasn't supposed to be there today, but then Jarvie decided to.
All right, Dante, calm down.
That's what it was, pretty much. That's how I felt like. I'm like, I had everything planned out, taking some time off. I was like, I backed away from some things, and all of a sudden, Jarvie was like the Boston clerks who went on a trip and wasn't coming back. All of a sudden, I was ready to. I was put in as the closer, but I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're finally here. We did put out our Kingdom of the Crystal Skull episode, also a little late after Dial of Destiny came out, but got a lot of good feedback from some people. Like people were excited to hear it. It hit for them. I'm glad it did. I still think that's one of the greatest podcast things we've ever done. As far as that, we really put that.
I thought so too. I mean, I was really impressed with it. I was really happy with it. I mean, it's weird to be impressed with yourself, but I was just happy to finally do a 2.5-hour podcast where we just heavily went to bat for that movie. Which, as it turns out, it looks like I'm going to have to do here too, which I was not necessarily anticipating going in. But
not to the same degree. Not to the same degree.
No, but I mean, I don't know, man. All right, I'm just going to get out of the way right now. The entire conversation around this movie has been kind of disastrous out the gate, from the fact that, yes, they spent too much money on it. And the conversation should not be about this movie, but the bigger Hollywood issue of spending money on movies.
Right, that's absolutely
but there was also a weird, right around the time the first teaser dropped, the tide against this movie changed online, and we started to see a lot of it. And I think that it's actually just an overall problem with where we are with our journalistic integrity in the media space, of how they write and cover and talk about this stuff, because there's a lot of really bad faith arguments being made against the movie. And I'm not saying you have to love the movie, but for everything to just be the focus on the film's budget now, and not actually giving the movie its actual credit. Because, Top Gun Maverick came out last year, had a Cannes premiere with a 5-minute standing ovation, and they called it this overwhelming 5-minute standing ovation. People loved it. Then this one gets a 5-minute standing ovation a year later, almost exactly to the day, that left Harrison Ford in tears, and people are calling it a lackluster standing ovation and stuff like that. Yeah, calling it lukewarm, and it's just very strange.
I don't even understand what a lukewarm standing ovation possibly is. That's it's like saying a happy, sad person.
If I got a 1-minute standing ovation for literally anything in my life, I'd just die then and there.
Yeah,
I wouldn't need more.
I agree. It's been kind of a weird. I mean, we know the underlying thing, especially on the YouTube space, that we try to avoid for say. But it's the idea that negativity sells. It gets more clicks. It's more easy to talk shit about something and to tear something down than to build it up. That's why the clicks are the way they are. They get their. I don't know why people like it. People like to watch people shit talking. Even us, people have told us at some point, and I'm no knock on them. I know it's fun when we banter about stuff and fight about things in a way, but people like it when we fight with each other about stuff and talk. That's another sign of negativity, which we try to avoid. I mean, we try to straddle that line very carefully, where we don't want to be bullshitting you. We want to call, if something is not working for us, we want to tell you it's not working for us, etc. But there's a difference between talking about some movies that just didn't work, yada yada yada, and actively trying to tear down something that is not that bad, or in some cases actually pretty damn good. This is one of those films that I think the other thing it just I feel like there was an active like hit put out against it because
No,
of the
there
Lucasfilm of
totally
it,
was. Yeah,
the
there
Lucasfilm
totally
of it
was.
all, the Kathleen Kennedy of it all. It seems like a lot of that is where it's coming from.
And I was gonna say that's also within the way the fandom has operated since 2015, unfortunately, because of Kathleen Kennedy, because of how everything looks with Star Wars to certain people. The fandom is incredibly broken. No one was willing to give this movie a chance. It feels like measurably the right way. And I just want to
Right.
read the opening paragraph of Jermaine Lucier's review of
Okay.
Dial of Destiny, because I think this is very much what you and I have been talking about. And I think he really captured and nailed like the overall weird conversation happening around this movie.
Right.
So if you guys have not gone over to Gizmodo, we'll actually put the link to his review below in the description. That way you guys can see it. PLD, I'm actually going to send it to you right now just so you have it.
But you're just assuming we're going to do this and have you talk to me about it first, but that's okay. I'm just
I
kidding.
know.
Absolutely.
Well, because I'm quoting it, I feel like it's very important that we actually
100%.
also link to it, because Jermaine's he's a very sound and like firm voice in the space. I've known him for a long time, but I felt like he really captured the thing that you and I have been saying for so long. And I always think that you and I do a really nice job of like saying the things we're trying to put out, but he really nailed it here. So, You know what? Here we go. In every measurable way, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is a proper Indiana Jones movie. It's got a great premise, exciting action, wonderful banter, and some fantastic twists and turns. The biggest issue with it is you're seeing it now in 2023, so it can't measure up to the memories of the original Indiana Jones films, which might make it feel slightly less than. But when you really break it down, not only does Dial of Destiny hit all the beats it needs to, it advances them just enough to stand on its own and provide plenty of that indie magic we all know and love. Think about it. How many times have you seen the original Indiana Jones films? A lot, we're guessing. And even if you haven't, more than likely you saw them when you were a kid, which made it very easy to become enamored with them. Basically, anyone interested in seeing Dial of Destiny probably holds at least some of that nostalgia, some of that impossible standard. But because even without that, most of us can agree that the first three films, Raiders, Temple of Doom, and Last Crusade, are all varying degrees of classics. Almost 35 years later, having those same expectations is a very lofty romantic notion.
Yeah, that's pretty much spot on what we've been saying the entire time. This is a film that would be impossible to stand up against. I mean, Indiana Jones is 80 years old. Harrison Ford is 80 years old. He's not the same man that he was in his 30s.
Or his 40s.
Or his 40s. And that's exactly the same thing. We're not in the same place. We are not living in the 1980s. You're not going to make a spot on 1980s film. And you know what? You really don't want that, I think. Honestly speaking, like you think you want it, but you don't, because it wouldn't make sense and it would feel false. This feels genuine. It feels exactly what an Indiana Jones at 80 should feel like.
Just like Crystal Skull was what Indy should have felt like at 60. And that's kind of where I want to go, starting with this entire conversation. Is it's very clear that no matter what happened post Last Crusade, this movie was never going to get its fair shake. It just wasn't. And that's because people are wanting this to be the first three. And while I do think that this is closer to the first three in a lot of ways than Crystal Skull may be, this one is clearly more like the adventure serial of the 30s and 40s set in the 60s.
Yeah,
but it's still doing its own thing.
Right.
And it's still not the movie that everyone is anticipating or wanting it to be, even though it is exactly the movie you should be anticipating. Because honestly, at the end of the day, Dial of Destiny is grappling with our hero's like loss of himself to time and where he stands in the test of time at the age of 80, as people are now going to space, and like what could have been seen as science fiction is now becoming science fact. Someone who is this archaeologist who was going around the world and studying history. No one seems to care about history now. His students are all bored at the beginning of the movie. None of them want to be there listening to him talking about the Battle of Syracuse. They all want to watch the Moon Day landing stuff.
Right.
And the astronauts coming back for the Moon Day parade.
Absolutely. And I want to throw out there, it's the important part is, and it's a visual cue as well. Henry Jones Jr., Indiana Jones, is an archaeologist who's someone who digs up fossils of the past. He is becoming the very thing that he's digging up. He's a man out of time, a man out of place. And this is actually interesting. I want to put this forward. We have not talked about this very much, this movie. So we're kind of we purposely decided to kind of like we gloss over some things. We both said we overall liked it.
It has been the longest 2 weeks of my life not being able to talk to you about this movie.
Right. So I'm very interested to see where we're going to go. I kind of got the feeling you might have liked it a little more than I did, but I'm not. But I think we're going to have an interesting meeting of the minds on it. I will say point blank, I want to talk about one overall thing that wasn't, I don't know if it's not necessarily an issue for me, but it is an interesting thing for me to deal with when it comes to this movie in general, is that this is the first time, obviously, the film is not directed by Steven Spielberg.
Oh,
and I do think,
which we all knew.
And I do think it misses a little bit of the Spielbergian flair. At the same time, I don't know if Spielberg tells this story the way James Mangold can. So in my head, I had this kind of like, I did mention this to you one way. I kind of said I had this thing that I liked and didn't like about it at the same time. I'm trying to marry it in my head. I want Indiana Jones to have a Spielbergian feel. At the same time, this is such a Mangold take on the story of where Indiana Jones is this time. I don't know if Spielberg could have made this as well as Mangold did in a way. So I wore my head over it at the same time. As I think, is it a better movie? Is it a better Indiana Jones movie? It doesn't matter at the end of the day.
It's a difficult line.
It's a weird thing in my head. Right?
It's a difficult line because the truth of the matter is, as we talked about it with Crystal Skull, is that it was very clear that Spielberg was not necessarily fully all in on the film, and his heart just didn't seem like it was all there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bummer because he's Steven Spielberg. You know, he's the greatest of all time, at least in my opinion. He's an all-time filmmaker. Spielberg now could make this indie movie to a point.
Right.
He can do a lot of the very lofty emotional beats and like those. That's kind of what he's been doing the last decade. When you look at Bridge of Spies, when you look at stuff like Lincoln, when you look at The Post, he's been doing a lot more heavy, dramatic, looking back sort of movies that are dealing and grappling with real life issues, but in the lens of why have we not gotten better?
Right.
And that's a very interesting thing. The thing is I don't know if he could also still do the globe-trotting part. And as we know, that was one of the things that Crystal Skull kind of had an issue with.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Was that they couldn't go around the world and do things because he didn't necessarily want to.
Right.
So because of that, you're right. I don't know if he could have made this movie. And I actually think ultimately at the end of the day, it's better that he produced it and did and like bowed out, because at the end of the day, I think that if someone doesn't have their heart in it, it's better to let someone who does try to see it to the end.
And I fully agree with that.
Yeah. And I think that James Mangold is kind of the perfect guy for that, because James Mangold is peak dad movie filmmaker.
Yeah,
Copland, really Ford v Ferrari, 310 to Yuma, Walk the Line, like all these movies that he's making, Logan, The Wolverine, peak dad movies. 100%. He's a dude who 100% went to the school of like Spielberg and Lucas and De Palma. Like he 100% feels like one of the guys who would have been friends with that group of rebels,
right,
from the 60s and 70s. True. You know, like that is the kind of vibe that Mangold has always given.
Right.
So he seems like the right choice. And then of course Ford picked him because Mangold helped with a lot of the reshoots that they did for Call of the Wild. And if you have not seen Call of the Wild, please, please, please see Call of the Wild. I think it's one of Ford's best movies in the last decade, and he's supremely good in it.
Right.
But in that, like, I guess Ford was the one who was like, hey, I think we're doing another movie. They'd been trying to work through what they were trying to do. And it was Mangold who came up with how to like do the opening and then seg it into the rest of the movie the right way. And I guess they kind of built Indy 5 on the set of Call of the Wild together. And then that's where it came to that when Spielberg stepped down, Ford was like, well, then I think Mangold should do it. I think he understands it. Right. And I think you can see it within the film because Mangold gets what Indy is.
Especially this indie specifically at this point.
Yes.
This is what Mangold does best as well. I mean, some people, I guess, an argument could be made that he's repeating a few of the beats from Logan. It is an old man, kind of out of time and everything else. But the fact is, he knows that story well, and he is definitely a tweak on that story to a degree. But he understands what someone at the kind of the twilight of his life is going through, and that's the story we want to tell with Indiana Jones, which is definitely a different Indiana Jones than we had seen before. But the thing is, it's not that different. It's not like it's an about turn face for Indy. It feels like the proper evolution of the character because of the time he's in now. He is a man out of time. He's a man at the end of his rope. He obviously, with the things we learn about in this film throughout the thing. I mean, we're talking spoilers or anything. There's a guy who's lost his son. This is a guy whose marriage has dissolved over the loss of
loss of the son. Yeah,
loss of the son, and he's a man who's living alone. He's at even a new place he's teaching.
He's
not
been
really
there for a
excited
decade,
there,
apparently.
and he's not very effective anymore at what he does. He's basically living out the days of his life. He's bored. He's a crotchety old man, and he needs something to get him to that next space where he can be comfortable with his place in life. And he does get there, which is the great part about Mangold knows what it takes to take someone on that journey. Harrison and Indiana Jones take that journey with some help, getting pulled, kicking and screaming at times. But it's a very interesting path for him to take. And that's why Mangold is good at what he does. And that's why it's a solid, solid entry into the franchise.
Well, and it also just really points home to some of the themes that begin in Crystal Skull, which is as you start to age, life starts taking things from you. The most exciting thing for me when we look at this and what Mangold was trying to do is he's looking back at the entirety of the Indiana Jones catalog. He's looking back at young Indiana Jones. He's looking back at everything that they've done.
Right.
And you look at the young Indy series, and a lot of what Indy is going through in this is very interesting because it's the parallel but a departure of what he had put his own father through. Because in the Young Indy series, Indy abandons his father to go to war.
Right.
And he survives. And, you know, the thing I like about it is that Indy goes on all these adventures and he meets all these people through time, all these very important historical figures, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, here, what happens?
It's the what if
Indy
it
gets
all.
Mutt. He and Mutt start to fight. Mutt joins the army just to basically fuck with his father and give him the middle finger and dies. And how do you handle that? Because now you're seeing what you did to your own father, but what the ramifications would have been. And I think that's really fascinating.
Oh, so yeah, and it's actually exciting for me because I am just now watching the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. I still am. I kind of it's the new ones they put on Disney Plus. It's like the film versions are an hour and a half, so it's not an easy binge per se. I kind of watch a couple a day. I'm on the Sean Patrick Fairlane area stuff. It's very exciting stuff. Though. It's very fun. It's very fun to watch, even though it's very different from Indiana Jones, purposely from Lucas. But I'm seeing exactly what that was as I watched Dial of Destiny. I saw exactly what that was. So what you're pointing out to me rings really clear, considering how I'm just literally just watching it now. And yeah, it's a great story to tell. It's a sad story to tell, and it definitely adds to Indiana Jones feeling like, again, I keep saying this phrase, but a man out of his time, because he has no one left. He's been losing people since Kingdom of Crystal Skull. He lost his father. He lost Marcus Shelby. Now he's lost Mutt. He's, for all intents and purposes in his life, lost Marion. He could get Marion back potentially, but he's lost Marion at this point. Who does he have at this point? He's going to see this like retirement party that he has. He doesn't really know anybody there per se, except for like that they're just people that are there. They're not friends really. I don't feel like there's any kind of kinship there. It was kind of like, it's not like it was him and Jim Broadbent as like they had a kinship when they worked there. These are just like co-workers basically. Who does he have? He has no one at this point. He's lost everything. So it's all a proper setup to have the payoff that we get at the end, where he finally figures out that he does have a place here. Still at this point. And it's a beautiful story, man. It's a beautiful story.
No, it is. And I think that ultimately at the end of the day, that is why this movie is so interesting to me, because I think it's actually a movie that looks back at the entirety of this series and this franchise and this entire IP as a whole and dares to ask, what happens when a man who has become obsessed with history becomes history himself. It actually goes back to Belloq's entire, one day, you and I could be looked at as historical type of things. Someday someone might dig us up. And I
Right.
think that's a very interesting idea.
Agreed. Fully agreed. And it's handled very well. And I guess the reason why some people might have issues with it is that it is, though, maybe not what they expected. And that's always an argument. You always have to balance your expectations with what the film is trying to tell you. This film is offering a different story than they expected. I think people, for some reason, expected or wanted an old Indiana Jones globetrotting adventure, fortune and glory, lucky Indiana Jones working his way through things, Indiana Jones punching out the bad guys. I mean, it's not what you were ever really going to get, and nor should you. Nor should you. We have to grow with our media, we have to grow with our story. Not just Indiana Jones, but a lot of our stories. These are older men now, and these are what the older men are going through. It's just not. It's a danger to not let your heroes grow old, because you're going to grow old. And how do we, media in general, movies, film, what we consume for art is a way to reflect life. And I kind of, in a way, not to get too poetic about it, I think people don't like it because a lot of the Indiana Jones fans are getting older. And they're starting to see themselves in Indiana Jones, and they don't like it. They don't like the fact that they're getting older themselves. They get reminded of that. They wanted to go to this movie and live out their glory days. That's a totally different story. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's a far more interesting choice to do what Mangold did.
I 100% agree with you. And that's kind of why this movie works for me so well. Because I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, I know there's a lot of talk that people are like, we're so tired of seeing our heroes burned out and all this shit. But it's like, it's life.
Mm-hmm.
Life has a way of being what it is. And I think that Dial of Destiny's biggest swing in a win is the fact that it really embraces that idea and then goes, but it doesn't always have to be like that. And you can find, even in the darkness, you can find that light. And yeah, it's kind of a thing that Crystal Skull also did. So you can look at it kind of as, Crystal Skull was kind of like an epilogue, and this is kind of a coda. You know what I'm saying? And they work together. There's a lot of thematic elements between the two that kind of come together in this way. And the stuff, including finding a son only to lose him, and then finding your true love to lose her again, but for her to still show up at the end and be like, the problem is you weren't you. And that was the thing. Indy thought he couldn't console Marion, but he also lost himself.
Right.
And I like that she in this adventure, in what happens with all of this, Indy finds himself again, which means he can find that part of himself that allows him to live out the rest of those days. Now, you can say, obviously, that Crystal Skull's the happier ending in some capacity. He has a son. He has a wife. But at the same time, I think that this is like the true ending and the one that you kind of expect.
Yeah. To me, if you're an Indiana Jones fan and there are out there, I don't want to ever, we had a strong defense in Kingdom Crystal Skull. We're having a pretty strong defense of Dial of Destiny, even though I don't think either of them need defenses. But we don't say you have to like these movies. If you want to have your happy ending be the end of Last Crusade, I totally get it. I understand. That's fine. Do your thing. But each of these films, Last Crusade, Kingdom Crystal Skull, Dial of Destiny, all have solid endings to the chapters. And you can choose. You can choose to like what you like, and whatever you want the final chapter to be, go forth. Go forth. I prefer what they're giving us, and I appreciate what they're giving us. I'm excited that here we are, 2023, Harrison Ford, 80-year-old, getting a new Indiana Jones film with an ending that we get, which, for the most part, hits all of the Indiana Jones beats I need at an 80-year-old Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. So that's kind of where we're at, right? So let's kind of dive into the movie itself. Let's talk about this movie set in 1969, right on the precipice of moving into the 70s.
Right. Which is such a great, interesting time period. It's got, obviously, they do fall back to the Nazis, the remnants of the Nazis, obviously, but there's also a lot going on that they kind of I don't want to say they gloss over it, but it's weighing it over every scene. You get these protests going on. They're protesting the Vietnam War in the background of the parade, while the government's pushing forth the moon landing as something to unify people. There's a lot going on in this time that is very poignant, even if they don't hit you over the head with it. But it's a great time period for Indiana Jones, who's living out some very crucial times in life at this point.
No, and I'll say this. We have to kind of talk about the opening bit in general. Obviously, because we've talked about it, let's just talk about it real quick. I want to get this part out of the way because I want to talk about there's so much to talk about and we only have so much time. Right. The opening 20 minutes is fantastic if you love old school Indiana Jones. Yeah. It's the DH Harrison Ford in 1944 fighting Nazis. It's great. The de-aging looks fantastic. His voice less so because you're hearing the older Harrison Ford voice coming out of a 40-year-old version of Ford.
That definitely
not quite the best.
Yeah, definitely distracted me. I was kind of like, you could have done better than that. Do the if you're gonna de-age his face, de-age his voice too at that point, honestly. But it is what it is. It's not the end of the world.
No, but
some people said it didn't look good. Some people said it didn't look good. I thought it looked fine. I mean, I'm not someone who could talk because I don't mind CGI generally. Anyways, it takes a lot for CGI to be really bad for me.
Yeah,
and this wasn't it. I thought I was fun. I got to see it. I saw young Indiana Jones, and that's all I need to say.
No, 100%. And I'm going to be honest with you. I kind of wondered if originally Basil was going to end up supposed to being Oxley, but I wonder if because John Hurt had passed away, they had to change the character.
Possibly, quite possibly.
I did have that thought because they even talked about it, they went to Oxford together. And now Basil's an Oxford archaeologist. Like, right. There is certainly some sort of connection there that I found very interesting. Yeah. I really like the opening because it's the one part of the movie that gives Indy like the old school adventure that you're hoping that you're going to get from this movie. Because again, Harrison Ford is in his 80s now. You cannot anticipate him being that guy in his 80s. So to start the movie that way and also have it tie into the bigger narrative is perfect and great. We get to meet the villain. That's fantastic.
Right.
It's a fun opening. I love it. It's a little too long, maybe.
But I was actually going to say my idea about this opening. I'm of two minds. A lot of movies, I'm of two minds. The film in general, I could see the argument that's a little long in general. It's 154 minutes. Does it have to be 154 minutes? It could be cut down here. And one way you could have cut this down is to have the opening in 1969 and maybe getting some of this stuff in a flashback or something to that effect. And I could see how that would work just as easily. And in fact, it would cover up any of the CGI voice issues because it's done in shorter bursts potentially.
Right.
But at the same time, I understand the choice not to because of what you just said. We are not going to get an old school Indiana Jones adventure. This is the way to try to appease that crowd, so to speak. It's a way like, here, we're going to give you like a brief, almost a TV episode of old school Indiana Jones, just to kind of go, here you go. This is not what you're getting the rest of the film. So in case you're disappointed by that, you have this port. It's the first 20 minutes of it is old school Indiana Jones doing what Indiana Jones does best. And I think it works in that fashion in a way. I get excited about it because I didn't expect old school Indiana Jones. So getting a little bit of old school Indiana Jones meant a lot to me. I'm kind of go, okay, it's kind of cool. I get to see that one last time, so to speak, in a way that we never could have done it before. So I understand why the choice was made. It could have worked a different way better as well, but I'm glad that it did what it did because I was having, especially the reveal. Not necessarily the reveal was with the taking the mask off, which is very proper Indiana Jones. It kind of felt like just sort of beginning of Crystal Skull again.
Yeah, I was going to say it's 100% a Crystal Skull style version of it.
Right, absolutely. But I did like the idea when he takes the hat and takes the whip back from his that kind of got me going, not much like the Shadows did. And hearing the theme pump for the first time, they kind of really held off on the theme in this one until he's on top of the train. And that's when it kicks in. You're kind of like, here we are. I was all in at that point.
I really loved the opening car chase, though, too, because it's very Last Crusade-esque. And honestly, This movie, I was thinking about it a lot. I still think that this one's probably overall closest in tone to Raiders, which is very interesting to me. It's very clear that that's the movie that they're kind of leaning on for it. But it's got a very Last Crusade style vibe also.
I gotta say, it has a little bit of everything in there. Because it feels a little bit like we said this about King of the Crystal Skull. there's moments from each of the films in here. There's some scary horror elements as far as like at least not horror, but big swings. Like Temple of Doom took some big swings with some of the stuff it does. This obviously takes some very big swings, especially in Act 3. I think that's kind of honoring that kind of level of things. We have the Raiders feel. You have the Last Crusade adventuresome at times. And we, like I said, we had some King of the Crystal Skull moments because it is a little bit of a coda epilogue, and that does repeat some of those beats 20 years, almost 20 years later in a way. But not in a repetitive kind of way. It's kind of like a period of life kind of way.
Yeah, 100%. And so, you know, having that opening, and I gotta say, I quite like Toby Jones in this as
I do.
Basil. I thought he was super fun. He was really, really charming. I just like him in general.
Me too.
He's a good actor. He's someone that I always look forward to being in things.
Yeah.
So it was very cool to see him in this. And I like that there's a very real dichotomy of their relationship. You get a real feel for it. And
Yeah.
that's the one thing that I think this movie does a little tiny bit better than Crystal Skull is I think that a lot of the newer characters at least feel a little more lived in, and that probably also helps that we do get like Sala also in it. So you start to see that lived in world really feel it. Like that was kind of what we talked about with Crystal Skull. Like it's such a bummer that John Rhys Davies turned it down the cameo because he really should have been at the wedding.
Right.
Especially now that we know that during the war, Indy got them out of Egypt and brought them to America.
Right.
So that means that they were in America at the time he got married. I digress. Also, the second flashback in the movie where Indy and Basil have their final confrontation when he leaves with the dial is set in 57, which I thought was very interesting. So that has to be either pre or post Crystal Skull.
Right. It was interesting because if it was post Crystal Skull, then Toby Jones probably should have been in the wedding too. Even though I know that's a story thing, the character wasn't even created yet. And
right,
he was he possibly might have been supposed to be Oxley, which would have made sense as well.
I'm like very convinced that there was clearly supposed to be some sort of like Oxley to it all.
Yeah. Because I mean, this was a development ever since Crystal Skull to a point anyway.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, because they had, I remember reading it. I totally didn't know this. I don't know how I didn't know this, but back in like 1979, when they're first doing Raiders of the Lost Ark, they signed on with Paramount to do 5 Indiana Jones films. So like this was like something they were planning to do for like they're supposed to have 5 films for a while. Obviously, it took them a while between 3 and 4. So they had to have some idea of what they wanted to do with it. Did things change? Of course, I'm sure things changed quite a bit. It always does. Lucas, especially, is the one who always changes the stories around a little bit to fit what is current for him. But yeah, I do think this was definitely an Oxley type character. And if John Hurt had been alive, I almost guarantee this would have been Oxley.
Oh yeah. Also, so you just brought it up, but this idea of they clearly have to have an idea of what they're doing. It's so funny because in the past, Lucas has 100% been like, I don't know if I'd want time travel in Indiana Jones, but honestly, this movie grappling with time travel the way it does was the exact right way to do it, in which, hey, time travel is not really a thing. There is a single pointed fissure in time that you can go to. A single moment.
Using mathematics and everything else, like they make it be as scientific as possible without going into the science fiction part of it. They try to lean it heavily on real life mathematics. I mean, it's still a leap of faith, as you were, but you make occasional leap of faith. See Last Crusade, but it's not like Indiana Jones got a DeLorean and got a flux capacitor is driving around, and it made some kind of actual physical sense, which actually was kind of cool to me.
Well, it does, and I want to say, because of what we were talking about with like young Indy, and one of the things about the way that Lucas tackled that show was that young Indy would meet very influential people through history who would have an impact on him and help, but he would also see the impact they were having on history in real time before they became like Patton, before they became certain things. And so for Indy to like rub up onto real history and meet Archimedes is 100% in line with the rest of what this franchise is. And it's actually the biggest swing of the movie that I enjoy so much, because to me, that is in keeping with what Lucas would have done with the character. If anything, this might be the most George Lucasy Indiana Jones move ever, other than putting aliens into it.
Right.
Like
Right.
100%, this is the kind of thing he would have done. And I love that it feels that honest and that earnest in doing it, and it's not nearly as jarring as you're anticipating it.
No,
And I
it's
love
not.
too that because we really haven't talked about Mads too much as Volaire. He's the villain of the film. But the one thing I love is, like every indie villain that we have talked about in the past, it is always them being so like up their own ass, believing that they can do anything. They're always right. Their egos are so big, and his undoing is that he is convinced that everything will go his way. I will finally become the new heir to the Nazi party. Like, I am going to be the new Fuhrer, only to end up in the Battle of Syracuse and to get killed because he was so obsessed with trying to do it.
Right.
And he was like, I can change time. No, you can't.
I saw some arguments against one of the criticisms about the film was that Mads Mikkelsen is a villain who's like his ideas or his motivations didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like the idea that so his goal is to go back in time and kill Hitler, and that's supposed to help the Nazi party survive, and yada yada yada. And there's this question about it, and to me, I'm kind of like, I don't. You're right. That is questionable motivation, and it is a kind of maybe a dumb move, but it doesn't mean that's not in line with everything that Indiana Jones villains have done.
It's also not nearly as dumb as he's thinking.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Because when we finally meet Volaire again in the 60s, his first that thing he says to the gentleman who brings him his dinner is, "You didn't win the war. Hitler lost it." This dude has spent 20 years thinking about how to go back and change the outcome of the war. And it's the kind of thing that you see all the time now in history documentaries. Like, I love a good documentary. So sitting down, watching stuff about World War II or the Civil War and the way these battles played out, and you hear these historians go, if one thing had changed, this battle could have gone a different way, and history changes. Yep. So there's nothing about that doesn't make sense. It 100% makes sense. He has spent 20 years going, if I make these specific moves, we win the war.
Yep.
And the Nazis gain power. That's what he wants.
And the arrogance comes into play to how to do it. And that's what always happened. Just like Cate Blanchett in the last movies, just like Belloc to a degree in the first movie. And so Walter Donovan in the third movie. All make these stupid, dumb mistakes that end them. Indiana Jones barely, the exception of Mola Ram, he is almost like not involved really with the defeating of the enemy. He's kind of like a side piece. He's just there on the adventure. It's their own arrogance, their own death. That's what an Indiana Jones film is.
Yeah. I'll say this. I do think it's a little bit of a bummer that the one thing the movie misses is the great villain death.
Yeah, you're right.
And I'm just going to call that as it is. And I wonder if that also is because they know they can't necessarily get away with doing more with it. Right. But honestly, man, we get the shot once the plane crashes of how Volaire's all scarred and stuff, but that's not the same. I wanted to see him I don't know, speared by the Romans or something. You got to see some other Nazis get speared. Why couldn't Volaire that was the only bummer. Yeah, for me in that moment was I really wanted to see him really go down.
Yeah, 100%.
Because he's a piece of shit. He's a Nazi, And I love that every time Indy sees him throughout the movie, it's always some quip about him being a Nazi because he's just so tired. He's like, it's been 20 years. You guys lost the war. Why are you still doing this? He's just so over it. He's like, you're an idiot. The Nazis lost. Just stop.
Right.
You can just tell he's tired.
But it's kind of funny. And that's kind of it's funny to me, how real world that is. Because we still have Nazis.
We're really dealing with it now.
Exactly. So they always come back like bad pennies, and we channel our own inheritance for at times. But yeah, no, it's right. Indiana Jones is exactly what you said. It's a tiring thing. It's almost like a commentary on the villainy because bringing the Nazis back, I remember initially I thought about kind of like it is a little bit of time. We've had the Nazis be the villains in Raiders, and the Nazis be the villains in Last Crusade. It almost felt like it was placating by going back to indie punching Nazis, but because of the real life aspects of it, it made a lot of sense. And the audience got to be Indiana Jones at the same time that we got to like live through Indiana Jones vicariously. Just stop. Just go away. You lost. You're over. You're done.
Who are these guys? Nazis. It's just every time he just seems so irritated, and it makes me laugh. Like it's so good. And you know, I really like Mads in the movie. I wish he had had a little more to do too. I just didn't think that. Although I think the scene with him and Indy and everyone on the boat when they kill Banderas is great, because it's when you find it's like a great Indy villain sequence of them actually talking about values and the things they're trying to do. I loved that.
Yeah.
I just kind of wish that there had been a little bit more, but I don't know at the same time why I feel that way, because really the only two who ever had that were going to be Cate Blanchett and Paul Freeman. Like Mola Ram and Indy don't have like a whole lot of conversation, and Walter Donovan and Indy really don't have a whole lot of conversation. So I'm not sure why I'm like, man, I wish it did more, but it's probably because it's Mads Mikkelsen.
I was about to say it's Mad. That's why you want, because Mads is so freaking cool. You want to hear Mads being villainous and everything. I would have thrown. You're talking about that the conversation about one of the coolest things about the film again to me is we get our typical. It's not typical, but the typical Indiana Jones movie has Indy facing a very much larger than life character like Pat Roach in the first three films, like the Russian in the last film. So you almost have to have it as one of those beats in an Indiana Jones movie, but it's treated so well here because this is 80-year-old Indiana Jones. He doesn't even get to stand a chance against the big guy this time. The guy's like, boom, you're done. And I like the commentary on that. It's like kind of like this. I'm sorry, guys. Harrison Indiana Jones can't do everything anymore. That's it felt so perfect, this movie.
That was 100% one of my favorite moments in the movie, because again, it's the movie saying he cannot be that guy anymore. And 100%. You know, I kept waiting for it too, in the same way that he gets one hit on him during the parade, and then he realizes there's nothing more he can really do, so he just runs.
Right.
Like, this movie is so good at using Ford's age in the right way. I thought the funny thing is like Crystal Skull in the 2000s, we all thought 60 looked so old or felt so old, and like they joke about it so much, but he does so much still in that movie. Then you get to this one, and this one is like, no, now he is actually an old man. Like, we now realize 60 is really not old. If you're taking care of yourself, Tom Cruise is still going to be throwing himself off of planes and shit in his 60s. It's just going to happen. Right. Look at Stallone too, right? Yeah. Stallone's been doing the Expendables movies for how long? Like, he was still doing Rocky. He's been doing Rambo. Like, these guys can still do it. Obviously, not everyone can, but the point is that 60 is not nearly as old as we make it out to be.
I know the funny thing is, like, I think we mentioned it last time, but I think it's apt to bring up at this point too. There's a joke in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull where Mo Williams says something like, "What are you, 80?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and here we are. Yes, now he is 80.
And now he's 80, he's tired, he's burned out, he can't do this stuff anymore. And the thing I like so much about the action, and you know, I kind of said it earlier, you get the Indy action you're hoping for in the opening, right? Indy punching the Nazis and having this like grand adventure. But the rest of the action throughout the movie, the thing I like a lot is that Indy is not necessarily wanting to be a part of it. He's never the driving force of it. He gets caught in the middle, and it's like he rides a horse to get out of the ticker tape parade and like goes through that race through New York, which is fantastic. And then when you get to Tunisia, and it's the car chase, and he's driving the car, he doesn't have to really punch anyone. He doesn't do anything like there's a little bit of running, but for the most part, Indy is kind of being led along by Helena Shaw because he's trying to protect her, but he doesn't want anything to do with any of it because he knows he's too old to be a part of this anymore.
Right. He's being dragged, kicking and screaming, but he is a very loyal person. He's always been that's been one of his biggest traits. Here, Indiana is loyal to his friends and his family, and Helena is his family, his goddaughter. And I want to point out there real quick, because you kind of mentioned it. Of course, there's the crap out there. Like people were, oh, Helena took over the movie, and it's Helena Shaw and the Dial of Destiny and stuff. And like, I don't know what people were expecting, but it absolutely made sense with the character and what was going on. You gave him a connection. She's his goddaughter with Toby Jones, and they built it up perfectly for something that's never been mentioned before. I thought they built it up perfectly, and it felt genuine. And she was a great character. I felt that she was fun. She was quippy. She was Indiana Jones before he became the Indiana Jones we know and love. She was the more selfish, the Fortune and Glory Indiana Jones era. We get to see her arc as well, but she never really takes over the movie. She's just the action piece. She's just the one we have to look to do the young action that the 80-year-old Harrison Ford can't do anymore. It's very much a dual purpose movie at this point. And not only does that not take anything away from Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones's arc, it actually adds a lot to it, because Indiana Jones gets to become his father. He gets to become the mentor. He likes being a professor. He can't reach his students. He's hoping he can reach Helena, who he sees a lot of. Sees a lot of himself in her. He wants her to avoid all the stuff that he went through, all the mistakes that he made in the year. I mean, it's very obvious that she's a young Indiana Jones. She even has her own like little version of Short Round. So he sees everything in her. And it made a lot of sense. And I love that aspect of it. So it was still all in service of Indiana Jones's arc, because that he is needed now. This is the way that he is needed. He can betroth his energy
because he hasn't felt needed since the death of his son and the fact that he couldn't fix his marriage.
So it's not Helena taking over. It's Helena being the action part that 80-year-old Indiana Jones can't do as well anymore.
Also,
all his services
to your point, where is this narrative coming from that they keep trying to replace him? Like, did we learn nothing from the last shot of the last movie?
No idea.
Like, the whole point of that was that, hey, no one is actually taking over this role from Ford. Right. No matter how much I may actually disagree with that, you're aware.
100%. I know you are. And I'll be completely honest with you. I would not mind seeing a Helena Shaw movie later on, or Helena Shaw series.
I wouldn't either.
I think it'd be kind of fun if we had a Helena Shaw and Short Round meetup sometime in like a Disney Plus. Like, that'd be kind of a cool thing. Broaden the world out a little bit. Doesn't mean she's taking over. She's taking over because Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones can't do it anymore. It's not like they're saying, "Oh, you know what? Fuck Indiana Jones. He's done." He's 80 years old.
Right, because also you're all complaining that they just made a movie about a broken down 80-year-old Indiana Jones, but then you're mad that they're trying to do more stuff. Make it make sense.
Right. Not that they're even trying to. There's been no announcement about it. There's no mention of it, really. It's all speculation.
And they're probably benefit now.
Right.
With absolutely. Not because the movie's not good. Again, I think this movie is great. I think it 100% is in line with everything I like about this series. Like, this to me is a peak specific Indiana Jones film, but they spent $300 million on it. Now, again, there's a conversation to be had
very much so
about what you're spending on movies. And this is not just a Indiana Jones specific thing. This has been a conversation we've been having for years.
But honestly, I will say it specifically that there's no way, shape, or form that an Indiana Jones movie should cost you $300 million.
But then you spend 30 minutes of the movie trying to de-age a character, and
right, which in that case is reason that would be the reason why you put it in the flashback mode and do it in shorter bursts. That solves budgetary problems as well. But that's an argument to be made in a different way, shape, or form. It is what it doesn't. It shouldn't impact the movie itself.
And speaking of that, in a weird way, is it weird to you that when we see Volaire again, that he doesn't have some sort of mark after being knocked off of a train? Like, I thought he would be scarred in some capacity, which I was super excited for.
A big bump.
Literally anything. That dude got hit by a metal pole off of a train. He really probably should have been beheaded. It's an Indiana Jones movie. I can let it go, but you didn't even give him a scar. That was a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah, I agree there. I agree with that entirely. See, we can be critical. We can be critical about things.
I mean, there's plenty that I can be like, hey, there's stuff I don't necessarily think is fully well handled.
Right.
But I also think for the most part, people are being absurdly hard on a movie that didn't deserve it.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. To me, it's always been about, and I think you'll agree with me, it's more about the core of the movie, the story it's trying to tell and the characters involved rather than all the details. The details that are filled in and they're nice, but when you nitpick about a lot of details, that's when it becomes like you're not taking you're not taking what the film's giving you, and like you got to do that in order to enjoy a movie, and that's some things just shouldn't be worried. You shouldn't worry about that kind of thing. Mention it and in fun jest, like we can go, oh, that's kind of dumb, but like it shouldn't be ruining a movie for you in any way.
No, and that's again the thing that we talk about all the time is people seem so specifically wanting to find the problems instead of like actually engaging with the thing that they're watching.
Yep.
And that's my frustration. Whereas like I know you liked Flash, and I have not really talked about this in any capacity. Flash kind of broke my heart because I thought that what it was trying to do and what it was trying to say was not engaging in the right way that I thought it should have been. That was my personal take on it. But I also, there is plenty of that movie that could have also been very good and was very good. But there was a lot that I thought, as I engaged with its story, I thought it kind of fundamentally did not engage with itself the right way. That was not me putting. It was not me putting on what I wanted out of it. It was me trying to engage with the story and going, "Hey, wait a minute! Like the thing that you just, I'm sorry, your ending makes no sense to the bigger grand scheme of the story you were just telling. Like it actually flies directly in the face of the story you were telling." But I digress. Et cetera, et cetera.
And we had this conversation, which it did work for me in different ways, and we can have that conversation all day and have fun with it. At the same time, we're going to let it go. You didn't like it. I did. Okay, move on.
Yeah, but we move on because it's not like me being like, man, Blair didn't have some sort of scar. This is a bad movie.
Right.
You Absolutely. Know what I'm saying? Like it's just it's a silly thing. I gotta say, man, we haven't talked about it yet a ton, but I really like Phoebe Waller-Bridge in this movie. I think the Helena Shaw character is such a great addition to some very great support characters he has had throughout the series. Absolutely. When you look at the short rounds of the series, when you look at obviously Marion, when you look at for me Mutt, when you look at Sala, to me
Marcus Brody,
Marcus Brody, of course, as we talked about earlier, Basil, Toby Jones. I really quite liked Helena Shaw, and I loved this fire that she puts into Indy again when she's in the classroom and she starts to answer the questions because none of the other kids in his class will, and that like look of just pure joy in his face when it's happening is so good. And also, just to that point, also love that this scene is literally telling us where this movie is going.
Yeah, me too. That was a great setup for it. Good movies do that, and you don't realize it until later on. At the very end, you're kind of like, "Oh, that's what that scene was in there for." Okay, gotcha.
The Battle of Syracuse.
Absolutely,
comes to Syracuse. I digress.
I think it's battle, but yeah, either way, it's all good. No, I agree with you though. It's. I will say right now, I'm going to point blank out. This actually, I have to see it again. Point being, I only saw this once, so definitely
I've seen it twice.
This is not like what we usually do. That's a weird thing about us when we do these movies, these franchises. We get to the new new installments. Usually, we've watched these movies a bunch of times. So usually we're going down. It's like not very rarely have we only watched it once. But in this case, I've only watched it once. But I wanna say that I think this very much could be my favorite Harrison Ford performance, like acting wise, as Indiana Jones. I don't mean that as like. I mean, he's probably funnier in others. He's got the quips that you miss the quips a little bit more, like during the first three, obviously the cockiness, because Indiana Jones is kind of like the Helena Shaw character in the first three. But Harrison Ford, as a pure actor, he has some real solid moments. I mean, you mentioned the scene with Helena in the teaching room. This is his face there. The scene where he discloses what happened to Mutt might be one of my favorite Harrison Ford moments.
It's in my top 5 indie moments too, because it's so heartbreaking.
It is so heartbreaking, and he sells it so well. The stuff at the end when he is back in time with Archimedes, brilliantly done. And then when Marion comes back in at the end, like all these sequences are just Harrison Ford putting on a masterclass. Like it actually makes me upset that he's never been an Academy Award winner because of that. Because he really is. Because he's just been so interesting all the time.
Because you're totally right, and it's so interesting because when you look at specifically like Crystal Skull, and his reaction to seeing Marion, where it's like this giddy school kid.
Yeah.
And then this one, when he sees her, and it's like a heartbreaking, why are you here? Because he's afraid that he's going to hurt her. And it's actually like very interesting because it's kind of the first time you get this idea that he's actually worried that he really did hurt her.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because they've talked about since Raiders what he did to her.
Right.
And you never really get the idea that it was nearly as impactful for him.
Right.
But then for everything to happen with Mutt and to realize how much pain he has put her through. And I love that moment. Like,
100%.
I thought it was so well handled. And Ford, it's just so different. And you can feel that pain and that just anguish of, did I do the right thing? I am so sorry I hurt you. Should you even be here right now?
Right. It's a brilliant sense. And honestly, Karen Allen plays it off perfectly as I knew she would. I'm very glad that they did get her in at the end of the film. It made sense to put her there. Like, I missed her a little bit throughout the film because her and Harrison's chemistry in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is one of my favorite parts about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It made sense that she wasn't in this film, especially with the story they were trying to tell until the end. But having her in at the very end was a very powerful moment, touching moment. And by the way, screw everybody out there. There's a couple of people out there who's like, oh, she was unrecognizable. Fuck you. She was beautiful. She was wonderful.
She looked incredible.
She was incredible. We all age, people. It's what happens.
And again, I think that's the bigger thing here, right? A bunch of people do not want to believe that people age. And that is a lot of the points of why they don't like where Indy's character ends up. But it's like, we age. That's what happens. Life.
And art is supposed to imitate life, people, and we're supposed to learn through it. And we learn through these characters. I know I learn sometimes I learn more than I should from movies and TV. I kind of like look at things and I'm able to process things because I watch situations go down. I turn around, I turn that and bring it to my life and I let it affect my life and see how I want to change things, how I want to act in my life, become a better person, things of that nature. But what a great moment. And I'll throw it out there, and even though we're not at the end, since we're talking about it, what a callback. What a callback to Raiders with the whole it hurts here. Where doesn't it hurt? Because couples have that. Like, when you're a couple, you have these kind of like inside jokes with them that you repeatedly go back to.
Yeah.
And they go back to that is such a lived in world moment. What a great way to kind of almost basically end it out.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic, and it just feels so in line for their characters. And especially because at the beginning of the movie, when you see the divorce papers, and then him taking the magnet and putting it over her picture and being like, it's just so heartbreaking. I when it started and that happened, I actually kind of got mad because I was like, this is not what we're doing. Like, not after all of that. You know what I'm saying? And then there's that like one line of dialogue on the television because the Indies wanted for murder because Boyd Holbrook's Kleber, he's the right hand for Valere. He murders some of the teachers at the college.
Right.
And then Indy gets framed, basically. And the news report goes, and he's lost his son recently. And you go, wait, what?
Right.
And I thought that was, and I went, I'm sorry, what the actual fuck is happening in this movie? And there was a little part of me that was like, I'm waiting to play it out. Like, I need to see what happens. And so when Helena goes, if you could time travel, what would you do? Like, where would you go? And she's talking about, would you go see Cleopatra? All these like very lofty things. And he was like, I would just go back to stop my son from enlisting. And it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, because it goes back, at least to me, it feels like such a specific tie back to the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles of Indy doing the same thing to his own father, but he survived and lived to tell the tale. And he and his father got to live out the rest of their days post Last Crusade together. It may never have always been perfect, but they got there. He's not going to get that chance with Mutt.
Right. I got to tell you, it's a very classic storytelling too, and classy way to tell a story. It was a subtle way to bring it up. You could have gotten the story when she asked the question. When she asked the question, he responds, I would have stopped my son from enlisting. But the drop in the news bit that you almost like, wait, did I hear that right? Did I just hear that right?
Yeah.
But it kind of lays the groundwork for that. I like that subtle kind of storytelling, how it builds. And also, I don't know if you noticed this or not. I noticed this. It was a very almost laugh out loud moment from Harrison, and very subtle at the end when Marion comes in and she moves around in the kitchen, he goes and very quickly kind of like takes the magnet off of her face.
Yes. Oh, I noticed 100%. Yeah, and he tries to make sure she doesn't notice it.
It's so good. It's so indie. It's such a great moment.
Her being like, I looked at your fridge and there was nothing inside of it, and it was like, yeah, that tracks, because I know if you're like me, I'm not always great at keeping food in the fridge. If I'm by myself, I'm not. Like, I cook and stuff, but the truth is a lot of the time if I'm feeling something, I kind of just go to the store and buy it, and then I come home. Like, my fridge is very full of beer and things. Much, unfortunately, to Chance's frustration. I feel bad about it, and I need to get a second fridge for it. But, like, this is a whole, like, it's a real thing. And so when she said that, I was like, I have never felt so seen in something so real in my life, with her being like, you're just not taking care of yourself. And you're like, fuck, man. Fuck. No, I'm not. Shit. Like, you know, it's one of those things.
Absolutely. 100%. Very sensitive there.
No, it was. And I think that Ford's speech about what happens is just, it's really heartbreaking. And but it's a really great moment too. And it's so funny because now people are really mad that it happened. And I'm like, but most of you hated the Mutt character. I'm not really understanding the, like, why people like, now suddenly people are really up in arms that Mutt was killed off screen. And you're like, but most of you didn't like Mutt. So I'm not really understanding why you're upset about it.
And, like, I get also sometimes the idea that killing someone off screen is a bad choice, but this really helps serve the story, and that makes it okay. When you surround everything with obviously Shia has his off-screen life choices that he's made, some difficult ones and some poor ones. It was obviously he wasn't coming back at this point.
Right.
He wasn't exactly a beloved character anyway.
Well, and also he openly talked shit about the movie and Spielberg also in the press. Yeah, like, I'm just gonna call it what it is. That was a stupid move.
That's what Harrison Ford said too. He basically called him an idiot for doing it, to be honest with you. And so there's no way he was coming back, way, shape, or form. So if you're gonna have that, but he's also a character that was important enough that you couldn't not know about. I mean, I guess you could have said he was off estranged too, but that weakens the idea of Harrison Ford, of Indiana Jones losing people all around him, and it made for the perfect reason for him to have a schism with Marion. So everything about the whole way they handled Mutt, I thought it could have been bad if written poorly, but it was written so well that it worked and was actually almost necessary to what they were trying to do.
Oh, 100%.
You can't have a Mutt and have Harrison Ford not be needed. You know, it doesn't make sense.
No, it definitely doesn't. So looking at the rest of it, Helena Shaw was just kind of the perfect version of adding a character in where you wouldn't have Mutt. I would have loved to see Mutt in this movie, but it was what it was. And so the workaround actually made a lot of sense for me. And she is so damn charming in this movie.
Yes.
And she is so fun in this movie. And I love that her and Indy, like, their rapport is fantastic. And I actually really like Teddy. I thought Teddy was super fun. Ethan Isidore, good actor, man. He's super just works. Like, I was afraid it would feel a little tacked on because this was kind of going into that Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, and then Dominion of adding more children into the thing where you're like, do we really need to keep doing this? Like, maybe we don't always need kids in it, but actually Teddy ends up being, like, very fun and they work and I like their back and forth. And the thing I really like about Helena, Indy sees a lot of himself in her, but I think the thing he sees the most is he sees the version of himself that Belloc was talking about. The one 100%. That if I just push you just enough into the darkness, you are me.
Yep.
And I think that is why at the end of it all, he's like, I have to do this. I don't necessarily want to.
Right.
But I'm going to.
Absolutely. 100%. I liked him as well. It was very dangerous for him to be it was obviously kind of inspired by Short Round, obviously, because I think it was definitely a mainstay to be Helena being in the earliest Indiana Jones we got in the films, not obviously not counting Young Indiana Jones, the earliest Indiana Jones films we got was him with Short Round. So giving Helena her own like child sidekick in a similar fashion made a lot of sense because Indiana Jones learns to care about Short Round, and that's like kind of the driving force with his character moving forward to a degree. Helena, who doesn't care about anybody, does care about the kid, and Indiana Jones points that out quite specifically. It's like, you care about the kid because he knows he did the same thing with Short Round, so it made it for a perfect thing. Could have had the danger of being just a Short Round kind of parody or Short Round caricature or whatever you want to call it, but it didn't because he was a good character. He was a fun character. He had his own shtick that worked, and
his own little arc too.
Yeah, his own little arc, absolutely. It was similar, but different enough.
Mm-hmm. No, it totally works, and I was glad that they put it in because that idea of her having a character that she actually cares about in this world that Indy could, I'm not going to say he exploits it, but is trying to point out that it's like, if you care about him, you are not as cold-blooded as you say you are.
It's his way in. It's his way into the conversation, and it works absolutely.
Okay, I have to ask you a question.
Okay,
did you think when we meet Ronaldo, Antonio Banderas' character, and we knew time travel was somehow possibly involved in this movie, and Teddy starts to talk about Ronaldo, and I was like, oh my God, he might be him. Like sometime, yeah, like there was like time travel shenanigans because Teddy was being like, this guy that Indy apparently knows, like he's supposed to be this great frogman, and he's got a bum leg, and I was like, we're gonna see him get a bum leg, and then there's gonna be like time travel shenanigans.
Right.
You know
I did very briefly consider that. I really did.
Okay, so it wasn't just me then.
No, I definitely I dismissed it pretty quickly, but it did pass through my mind for a little bit. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it was like it was there and it was gone, but there was a small second where I considered that a possibility.
By the way, was it me? Maybe I didn't. I never saw a picture of Antonio Banderas or still of Antonio Banderas in terms of in this film. In this film, right? I didn't see him in costume or anything like that, so I knew nothing about it. So I got to be honest with you, when I first saw his character, I didn't recognize it as Antonio Banderas.
Oh, I was kind of like, I had seen set pictures of him at one point. That was the only reason I remembered.
So like at first, like 2 minutes, I'm like, okay, Ronaldo. I actually was almost expecting when he started talking about the guy, I kind of almost expected, oh, are we getting Katanga here? Is that what we're getting here like that? But I'm like, okay, it's not. Like, oh, who's this guy? Just okay, some other guy. Then I went, wait a minute, that's fucking Antonio Banderas. Okay, cool, I love it.
Yeah, I liked that. I wish he had more to do, but I thought he was such a welcome addition in general because he's Antonio Banderas. He's a great actor, and he really makes the world that he's a part of feel lived in. I would have loved to know a little more about where that history comes from.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, personally speaking,
we have a lot of open room for an animated series. Lucasfilm, I'm telling you right now. you could do Lucasfilm. We could do Indiana Jones Adventures with Toby Jones. We could do Indiana Jones Adventures with Ronaldo. Indiana Jones Adventures with anybody.
Right? Like the indie universe is a lot bigger, I think, than people realize. There's a lot of different directions it can go. There's a lot of ways to take it. So I'm just glad ultimately at the end of the day that we have even 5 movies that are this good, plus the TV show that's this good, like plus the games, plus the comics, plus the books. Like there's plenty of indie material out there, but I want to start spending time with some of the other characters because they're all interesting to me.
Absolutely. And we could even add more. And that's what I love about that idea. So much out there. And he obviously had so many different adventures. There's so many different MacGuffins you could throw in there. And let's be honest. Yeah. Would it be believable that there's so many MacGuffins and everything? No, probably not. But it's a fucking show. It's a fucking adventure. You allow yourself that.
Area 51 clearly had more stuff. We're good. Absolutely. I'm not worried about it. That's my workaround in my mind.
Like we mentioned before, Indiana Jones at Warehouse 13.
I was a little, in the right way, I was real sad when they killed Ronaldo, but I also liked because it was a good moment that harkened back to Temple of Doom. It was something we hadn't seen in a while, and that's a very interesting bookend in some capacity of the chronological versions of if you watch these movies, right?
Right.
Because 100%. Temple of Doom opens with one character that he is with dying, Wuhan. Then you look at this and like that moment when Helena is still like celebrating that they got this, the next clue for where they're going and all these things. And Indy's like, my friend
That
just
guy
died.
died. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
what are we talking about here? And he's trying to get them to like see someone just died. Someone I cared about, someone I was close to just died. And I really liked that because we've really never seen him struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I actually would say that's a criticism of Temple of Doom is that, and one thing we didn't even bring up that we never really think about it. He never really properly grieved for Wuhan. He gets away, he's excited to get away from Chalet there, the airlines, and all of a sudden he gets on there, and okay, so Wuhan's gone, and okay, but I'm gonna put my hat over my head and just sleep away the day. Not even a word about him again. But yeah. Absolutely. I also want to say that it also comes in play, like the little bit having Ronaldo in there. That also comes into play Raiders of the Lost Ark. How long is Jacques on the screen for?
Yeah,
But he's obviously somebody who works with Indy.
A minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Right.
It's so funny. People are so up in arms about Antonio Banderas and it being wasted. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wish he had more to do, but I like the character. I liked him. I thought he was fun, and that's all that matters, right? At the end of the day, he's just fun.
And it's a fun little thing. And honestly, it's probably fun for him. It's the kind of thing where Antonio Banderas said, wait, I got a shot to be in the Indiana Jones franchise, for half an hour or 10 minutes or whatever it is. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
What's not to like about that?
Right.
I
absolutely.
love that about it. I do really like Boyd Holbrook in this too, even though he's not doing anything different than he's already doing in Logan. But I like that he's kind of become James Mangold's guy, and he just keeps putting him in things. Because Boyd Holbrook is becoming one of those character actors for me. Like, I'm thrilled that he is in the new city, in the new Justified, City of Primeval season.
Right.
Like him being the villain against Timothy Oliphant. Give me it now. Like that is the kind of thing I like. And so for him to be in this opposite like Harrison Ford and all that is so good. That shot when he walks in with the gun and he's telling them not to move when they're at the college is fantastic. That dude, him, like when they first walk in and we see him for the first time, and he's trying to speak German,
right?
Because he's clearly a Nazi sympathizer who wants to be a Nazi in America is fantastic. Like there's these little character things for him.
He's a perfect Nazi. Let's be honest. He's the perfect character to play a Nazi.
Yeah. It makes me more sad that The Predator was not better. You know what I'm saying? Because it's the one time he got to like lead a movie.
Right. And I think he was good in it. I thought he was very good in it.
He's totally good in it, but it just makes me sad.
Yeah.
Because
I like The Predator more than most, but yeah, I wish he had got a better chance. Yeah.
We all make choices in life.
I can't wait till we get to the Predator franchise. That's gonna be a fun episode.
I bow out. I don't want to do it again. I can't. Not after what happened with Halloween Resurrection. Not after what happened with. I can't do it, man. Halloween Resurrection is one of the worst podcasts we've ever done for me personally because I don't like talking that badly about anything, and The Predator is not going to be a fun conversation for me.
Unfortunately, when we do franchises like we do, there's always that one installment that we're all kind of like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, well, that one can bite me, is all I'm saying.
It's also got Aliens versus Predator and Aliens vs. Predator 2 Requiem in that run as well, and that's
Lord, give me strength.
Yeah, that's a little rough there. I might have to, yeah.
I think we're gonna have to think this one through, man. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, you know what? I'm good if we scrap it because that also means Alien Resurrection is a part of this, and I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole. And I don't necessarily want to open the Prometheus rabbit hole for certain people because I really like that movie, and I don't really want to hear. Yeah, you know exactly.
That would make me want to do it because I almost want to do it in defense of Prometheus, like if we did
we did for Crystal Skull. I mean, we could do it. That's fair. You know, I just keep waiting. We're so going off track all of a sudden. I just keep waiting for Ridley to do a director's cut of that movie because you just know he has it in him where he wants to mess with it. He's 100% going to.
Absolutely. And speaking of Ridley Scott, that trailer for Napoleon,
I actually haven't watched it yet.
85 years old. The guy can still do scope better than most directors that are working today. As far as like epic scopes. Exactly. So
and now he's doing Gladiator 2. What world are we living in?
That's a great question. We are doing, by the way, guys, we're doing our 10-minute we didn't do our 10 minutes pre-spiel like we usually do, so we're doing it in the middle of the episode instead.
Right in the middle of the Indiana Jones 5 review. Let me stop you right here, where we can talk all about Ridley Scott and his filmography and how much I don't want to cover The Predator later on in another podcast. Let's just dead halt the conversation around Indy 5 right now. We are so good at this. So good.
Awesome. Yeah, Ridley Scott's another 80-year-old who's doing his kicking ass still. That's where the connection lies. Ridley Scott and Indiana Jones.
And he directed Harrison Ford in Blade Runner.
There you go. Bring it all back.
There's your connection if you really need it. I'm just saying. So it's just, oh my God, boy. Anyway, I'm going to get us back on track.
Boyd Holbrook. That's where we were.
Kleber is a great character. And actually, again, the thing we were talking about earlier, right? Could Steven Spielberg have made this movie now? Potentially.
He could have. He's the GOAT. He could do anything he wants to do.
Correct. Right. And we both agree on that.
Right.
But the thing that Mangold is very smart about, in the same way that Spielberg is, hey, man, we're still dealing with Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? Some of them are American.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and put an American Nazi in the middle of the movie as one of the villains. Because they were there. Even if he was part of the FBI or whatever it is, they exist. They hide. They manipulate. They're around. That was a very modern day smart move.
100%. I love that aspect of it. It makes him more present, obviously, because Voeller's the older guy. He's from the World War II era. So having him updated, it makes very much sense if they're going to invade America. Well, not really invade, but to get to Indiana Jones, to get to the dial, to have someone in place like a Boyd Holbrook character, and it worked very well.
Oh, it 100% does. He's real good. He's great. He's Boyd Holbrook. Like, again, he's becoming a character actor that you can just count on. If he pops up in something, you're gonna like it.
Oh yeah. Oh, he does. He can handle that role. Absolutely.
Yeah, like that's why I always get excited whenever he signs on to something, because he's that good. I gotta say too, this movie, because it's not Steven Spielberg, it doesn't necessarily have the like nostalgic Spielberg glow for the world. It's got a much more muted tone and feel because of what it's dealing with and where Indy is in life. And I think that's what made Mangold perfect for this in the end.
Right.
And that's why I'm glad he ended up doing it, because you kind of talked about it up top. Mangold's really good at these specific types of stories. And I think that the last Indy movie kind of feeling like this and being handled by someone like this works really well. But he also shoots action very well. And the action beats in this movie are super well done.
Absolutely. And not to turn this into the Holy Snooks for now, but this is actually one of the reasons why I really am excited to see a James Mangold taking on the old 25,000 Dawn of the Jedi movie, because I think he will serve that absolutely properly, because of his action beats, because it's going to be an older generation discovering things. I think he's going to be brilliant in the storytelling. Sorry for the Holy Snooks detour there, but I'm really looking forward to Mangold Star Wars.
Well, I am too. Like, I'm hoping post all this that there's no weird, because of Indy's box office, that they shuffle
kind of
off.
thing. Yeah, I don't think they will. I feel like that, because the idea is, again, we're going to throw it away again here. Let's go off a sidetrack a little bit. Colin Trevorrow being canned was not just his bad movies, but they obviously didn't really work well together. So you having problems. Mangold definitively worked well with Lucasfilm, and they were very happy with their working relationship, obviously. So I think that will help smooth things over. Everybody who has been replaced by Lucasfilm generally is not just been it's been like they did something shitty, they got questionable, but they also seem to have maybe potentially issues with the director versus this. Mangold is almost like part of the family now. I think he'll be fine.
I hope so, because
I think I think so.
I mean,
I'm pretty confident.
That's all. I'm trying to be, but I'm going to call it what it is. We've seen a lot of changes over at Lucasfilm and
100%.
over time that have been a little too
100%
reactionary.
But Mangold has also been one who has a very large track record as well. Like, consider he's been around for a long time and very successful for a long time. He's one of the guys that you can kind of like, he gets a bump in the road. He gets that. He's earned the bump in the road kind of thing.
Totally. All right, so we were talking about the action set pieces, though. What did you like? What did you think? Where's your mind at with the action beats in the movie?
Well, the action beats again. We got the first 20 minutes, which were the fun Indiana Jones action beats. Got what we were. The car chase was a lot of fun because of the repartee between him and Helena. That was actually made up. The best Indiana Jones beats come from the quips between each other while they're doing the action, because that's always makes you laugh, makes you get enjoyed. So the car chase was a lot of fun for me doing that. I liked, again, same thing when they're climbing the wall. And that's not really a real action beat, but it's still kind of like them climbing the wall, having those same kind of quips. Like, you know, I've seen voodoo. I've been shot 9 times, once by your father. Really shot you?
Dad shot you?
Dad shot you?
Yeah, that's so good.
So good.
So good. You didn't have to drink the blood of Kali.
So those are my favorite bits of action, and the ending battle, and the Battle of Syracuse. A lot of fun to watch. You get to see that in Indiana Jones, getting to see Roman gladiators destroy each other with, like, you know, spears and catapults and everything else. And
Indy's face witnessing history is
beautiful,
just incredible. Yeah, it honestly rivals for me him looking at the atomic bomb cloud.
Yes. Totally right. What a great shot.
Very similar to me, and just him seeing it, and it's beautiful, like him seeing history, because for so long he studied this stuff and it all mattered. And that's why when he meets Archimedes for the first time, like it's amazing. It's just so feel good. And so that's why when he's like, I'm gonna stay.
Yeah.
And he was going to stay in history because that's where he felt like he belonged, because he felt like he didn't belong in time. Like he didn't belong in the modern age. And Helena being like, no, you belong to us. And I loved this, because this is where Helena finally flips.
Absolutely. Although, first of all, I have to ask you, did you think for a moment that that might be what the ending was?
Oh, yeah, I 100% really thought they were going to do it. I really did. I thought they were going to do it, because you know why? It would have been very fitting in some capacity for it to be that way. And again, it would have gone back to the Belloc of it all.
Right. I always had this like weird, quick notion that Indiana Jones was going to stay in the past, and they're going to jump for the future, and Helen was going to open up some kind of, like, I don't know, tomb or something like that, and you're going to see like the whip or something like that, something like that, like from a long time ago. It would have been fun in a way, but I'm actually happier that we got what we got.
Oh, I'm way happier, because I don't want that ending at the end of the day.
It's not a proper ending. It's a fun ending, but like it goes against the story that it's trying to tell, of you accepting your age, accepting your place in life, and accepting that life goes on. It's like it tells the wrong side. It tells actually the people the people I've talked about before, the trolls who wanted just the early indie movies. It tells them that they're right, that we should live in the past, and we should be buried with our past, and not have to live the rest of our life out, not have to grow old, and have to face
not deal with I was going to say, not deal with the things that life is going to throw at you. Like, that's not life.
And the fact is, even at 8 years old, you do have a place in this world, and people do still need you. And that became such a more touching and more powerful statement to make, even if it was against Indiana Jones's wishes. And I saw some pushback about that. It's kind of like, well, Helena made that decision for him, and that doesn't mean so if Indy was going to do that, he should have made the decision to go forward. No, it's okay, because he needed to be shown. And when Indy wakes up and then Marion walks in, he does learn, and he's happy about it at the end.
Yeah, but I would much rather we have that sort of ending of acceptance and accepting where we are, and then that's why I called it like the coda to it all, right? Because to me, it just feels like that very natural button on what Crystal Skull was trying to say. But now you're pushing it to but now we're at the brink of, I don't even fit anymore.
Right.
Now what? And I think that's very fascinating. I think it's very interesting. This movie has so many lofty ideas in how it sees Indy, and how it sees the character, and it's the world, and how he operates. And I think that it's a lot more melancholy than I think people were anticipating. And I also think that it speaks volumes to the fact that people aren't willing to engage with their characters being pushed, and I'm not really sure where this is coming from. I've never been a fan of sequels that just do the same thing with their characters. I think it's lazy. I think it's boring. I don't want that.
Agreed.
And so for the indie movies to continually Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, Crystal Skull, and now Dial, they've all pushed the character. And it goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier, is that because you grew up with the first three, you just accept them as classics as they are.
Right.
And you look past the fact that all three of those movies are pushing that character in specific directions, and that's how you see the character. But the thing is as time marches on, that character still has to evolve. And I like that these movies are pushing him in directions that are uncomfortable, because life can be uncomfortable.
Absolutely. 100%.
It's important, right? Like, it is. Yeah. It just is. And so the fact that these movies, and in particular Crystal Skull and Dial, their lofty goals are to say, look, we know life is hard. Your character, Last Jedi does the same thing. You think that you're this ultimate failure. And I think this is the problem I have with a lot of the conversation happening around the movie. There's all these people who think that the movies are saying that Luke and Indy have been failures. So this ties into The Last Jedi as well. But in saying that, you're inherently missing the point.
The whole point of the movie. Absolutely.
The whole point of these movies is that they actually were not.
Right.
That they believed the worst of themselves. They believed that darkness. They succumbed to it, only to be like, no, wait, I wasn't wrong.
They were properly evolved versions of the character. Could they have evolved differently? Absolutely, they could have. But the evolution that the films chose to present them were extremely 100% valid. And if you didn't like it, that's more on you than it is to them.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I think that's why, for me, when I look at the movie and I see the way that people are talking about it and interacting with it, I get frustrated, because I think that it's just not coming from a place where people are willingly engaging with what the movie is trying to say. Indy is not a down and out trodden failure of an old man. He's an older man who just went through something very tragic and didn't know how to deal with it. So he locked himself away, and then life presents itself to discover again who he is, and it breaks him of that. It frees him of the pain, and it frees him of that thing that's holding you back. It's a very personal thing. And I know that we've all dealt with this sort of stuff in the past. Like, you forget that there are always going to be times that you are also going to feel these things, and you're going to feel down and trodden and broken, and someone or something is going to come along and break that chain open, and you're going to feel that freeing sensation again, where it's suddenly life makes sense again, and you go, oh my God, what have I been doing? That is what this movie is presenting. Yes, that is what this movie is presenting. Sorry, I keep cutting you off because I'm just like,
no, you're passionate. I get it. I get it.
Yes, I'm just like, I don't understand why people don't understand it. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me. And maybe, fine, you don't want your heroes to be flawed. You don't want them to feel these moments. But the truth of the matter is we all feel these moments. And so for this movie to take a character that you have loved for 40 years and push him to this point of, am I wrong? Am I out of time? Am I broken? Am I lost? Is there anything left to my life? Yes, there is. Yes. You can live it until the end. Like, please embrace yourself. Embrace who you are. Are you you? Are you Indiana Jones? What does Marion say? Someone told me that you were back, Indy.
Back. Yeah.
Are you back?
Yep. Oh, so good. So it's a great line. That's a great line. And it leads to that great ending. It leads to that great ending, which is a humorous ending, but actually still fits exactly the place. It's a very Kingdom of the Crystal Skull ending. There we go. We have the fedora on the clothesline. And what happens at the end after the student married? Are you back? He grabs the fedora off the clothesline. It's a funny thing. You're not supposed to take it seriously, like they're going to go have another adventure, but it makes the statement better than anybody else could have done. Yes, Indy's back. Harrison Ford's back. He is. It's a wonderful way to end the film.
It's a wonderful way to end the film. It's a wonderful way to actually handle the character and saying goodbye to him. Like, once again, it just makes sense. It all works. This is a smart, well-written, very tightly put together film.
Yeah,
that
I agree.
It has its problems. I do think, like, I love when they go and get the dial piece underwater, but I also think that the sequence is a little
Wonky.
all over the place plotting wise. Like, it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to tell what's going on. Underwater sequences are just notoriously not easy in general. But I
1000%.
love the eels. I thought the eels were a great addition.
Yeah, I like those too, especially because it was like kind of like they look like snakes. Snakes? Kind of thing. It was like
No, they don't. No, they don't.
no, they don't. They don't. Not at all. It was a great way to do the snakes thing without overdoing the snake thing. Like that was one of my criticisms about King of the Crystal Skull with the snake thing. That was a little bit much for me. I think like they use the snake as a rope. This was a great way to have the bit without having it be overdone. Just to remind you of it. It's good.
And you know what? That's the thing that this movie does really well that we really haven't talked about is like there's a lot of little nods and little callbacks and things, but they're all done in such a like non-intrusive way because it's usually through dialogue.
Case in point, the end of the right at the very end when Sala leaves the apartment, what do we hear?
Oh yeah, him singing the song again.
It's all good. Sala, because you can barely hear it. You have to kind of listen for it, but it's there. So they still call back. Sala being Sala.
Well, and him showing up when he walks in the door and he's telling the story of Indy and Marion running away from the plane. Right before my friends, I thought you were dead. Like, also, God, it was just so good to see Sala. We haven't talked about it.
No,
it really was, and I loved that it starts with like an action beat of Sala punching a dude out and putting Indy in the car, and him being the one who gives him the hat and the whip.
Yes,
and
so good.
It was such a good moment, and it really worked. And then for him to be like, "I want to come with you," and then he's like, "This is not an adventure."
Yeah.
But it could be, and of course, it ends up being one. But Indy is so against it being one because he doesn't want anything to do with it.
And that's because what makes it really work extra for me is the fact that Sala is where Indy gets to be at the end of the film. Sala is very satisfied with his place in life now. I mean, he does miss the adventure side of things, obviously. Yeah, the other part of him wants to go back and he misses the sea, he misses everything else. But he's also very comfortable with who he is and where he is in life, to a degree. And he's not like depressed, and he knows he's needed. He's a proper 80-ish-year-old. Of course, he misses his younger days. It's okay to miss your youth. It's okay to miss the adventure when you're younger, but that doesn't stop him from providing what he needs to provide to his family, to Indy. It's a great little moment. I do like the caramel Indiana Jones,
and then Indy almost getting hit by a car.
So good.
There's just a lot of little bits like that, and that like little smile where he's like, "Shit, I almost got Indy killed just now." It's like, this is why Indy doesn't want you on the adventure. This is straight up I said no camels. That's what it felt like. So that was really good, and I love that the movie ending with the three of them though in some capacity together feels like a proper bookend to the franchise as a whole, because when you think of Indy, you think of Indy, Marion, and Sala. Like, as far as the core characters are, that's who you think of. Yeah, like Short Round exists, and you think of his father, and you think of Marcus and all that. And I mean, for obvious reason, Marcus can't be in the movie. So for the kind of core three, if you will, of the original movie to appear, was just kind of icing on the cake.
Yeah,
it was nice. And I'm really heartened by the fact that you enjoyed the movie as much as you did, and I'm glad that this conversation has been as fun as it has been, because to be honest, I really wasn't sure the direction it was going to go.
I wasn't either. You're right.
I was nervous because again, we hadn't really talked about it. I knew you liked it, but I don't know. You seemed so muted on it originally when you walked out, and so I was like, I am not prepared to have to like battle axe you on this movie.
I think part of me had to process it. And I think, like I said, part of me was dealing with the non-Spielbergian, more Mangold side of things. And I got there. It did just take a little bit. It did take me a little bit. Like, I didn't expect anything differently, but it's still, you expect something, but when you get it, it still sometimes takes time to kind of process through and think about and really see that it did work. It's a little different, but different doesn't necessarily mean bad. So I was a little muted about it because I had a long time to try to process it. But I still
That's
might
why I
not like
need
it
this.
as much as you, but I still enjoyed it quite a bit. I still think it's a very fitting way to end the franchise. I think it's a very fitting entry to the franchise. But yeah,
I mean, it's a good movie, man, and it's a proper, smartly written finale. And I think
absolutely,
that at the end of the day, like if Crystal Skull had been the end, I would have been fine. Look, if Last
100%,
Crusade had been the end, I would have been fine. But
100%.
the truth of the matter was it was not. And I'm actually very glad that we have had two very separate but interesting looks at what happens to Indy post Last Crusade. And I think that they are both very smart, very fitting.
I was going to say that. I mean, same thing. Last Crusade was the end of it. Would have been great. But I am glad that we got two further entries. That means we get two further stories with Indiana Jones. And how can that be a bad thing? Come on. How can that be a bad thing?
Well, don't say that too loud because we're going to get comments down below that are going to tell us exactly why it's a bad thing or something, even though we have clearly spent so much time defending these two movies in different capacities. Yeah. I feel like there's so much more I want to talk about, but at the same time, I feel like at that point we're just spinning wheels.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, yeah,
A little bit. I feel like
we went an hour longer defending Crystal Skull, but we've been living with that defense of
only
Crystal
half
Skull
an
for
hour.
whatever it was. Was it two? I thought it was 2.5 hours. That's right. Either way,
maybe.
But we have also we lived in that film for a long time. A lot of things that bothered up. This we're still kind of scratching the surface of. Give us another couple of years when we have a couple more watchings each.
I do have something I want to talk about actually.
Right,
we were talking about all these moments in the movie that were really good of Ford. But there is one moment in particular that, and we kind of scratched that it was a moment that happened, but the last moment between him and Toby Jones in 1957 is some of Ford's best acting when Basil it's the last night, because Indy makes reference to it in the movie of the last night that he had seen Helena.
Right.
When he took the dial.
Right.
And I really appreciate that we didn't necessarily need it, but I'm glad we saw it because Ford is so good and Toby Jones is so good. And there's this moment where he's like, but then it's not science, Basil. And like the way he delivers the line is so heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize how far gone this relationship is in that moment. And that like that look of pain on Basil's face and then the look of pain on Indy's face. It's gut wrenching. And I really thought that was like a really nice thing. Similarly, in the finale, when we get to the parts involving them trying to get through the rift, and he keeps he's trying to tell Valere that he's got it wrong. And there's that moment he starts to just laugh because he realizes, he knows that this is he's like, you have the wrong time. Like, you're wrong. The coordinates are wrong. This is it. Like, you're not going where you think you're going. Yep. And I loved that. I thought that was fantastic. And it plays into the thing that we talked about earlier, which is the way that Archimedes created that rift with the dial was specifically that it would only go to one place at one time because it had to be the Battle of Syracuse, because the movie spends so much time telling us that is exactly where we're going to end up.
Right. And Archimedes, we're going to end up with Archimedes. Of course, it has to go back to where he found it. He found the coordinates that existed at that time. So it's just, I agree 100%. And I do love that sequence of Toby Jones as well, because they actually, just Toby and Harrison work very well together. It makes me want to see them do more together because they just have a great chemistry, spark of chemistry that it's hard to capture that. You can't force that. It just kind of happens. And it adds so much to the Wombat character, Helena character, Wombat. I love that nickname, by the way, too, because it did help her feel more lived in giving her that nickname like that.
It's very short round.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And adding that onto it made it for a great addition to Helena's arc. All of our heroes have arcs, and that's a good thing. I mean, like, a lot of people use that against the film as like, this should be Indiana Jones' arc, but all the films, like Sean Connery had an arc in in Last Crusade. I mean, Short Round has a little bit of an arc. Temple of Doom, like, they all have arcs. It's just it's okay to have a secondary character having an arc as well. It actually makes for a good,
you should want
story.
That.
Absolutely. But then if they don't, then they're just window dressing. And that you don't want just window dressing as you want lived in worlds who were people making advances. But I digress.
Well, and it's funny because like in that same breath, that's why people seem so frustrated about the Ronaldo thing with Antonio Banderas. But at the same time, even Banderas was like, look, man, it was a cameo, but I was happy I got to do it because I got to be in an Indiana Jones movie. Like, sure, okay, he's kind of window dressing, but it works.
Right. That, and therein lies the difference. Antonio Banderas' character was never meant to be more than just that window dressing type thing and be like, oh, we got a good actor in a small role, which of course we've always talked about in franchises. When you put these like great actors in these kind of small cameo roles, it just expands the film out to the point where you have that support. It gives such great support to the leading roles. It can only make the film better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, overall, man, this is a movie that I think is going to continue kind of like Crystal Skull. I think the narrative is going to change once people stop focusing on the box office budget thing of it all. The fact that that is the only conversation around it is just mind-numbingly frustrating instead of actually engaging with the film and what it's trying to say and what it's trying to do. And then there's the people who are trying to bad faith what the film is trying to say without actually understanding what the film is trying to say.
Right.
Both of these things can be true. And I'm glad to be, once again, apparently, on the forefront of us being like, hey, guys, actually, this movie, really good. You should probably look into what it's trying to say and do more than just being reactionary nerds on the internet. Like, it's just weird that we're doing the same thing 15 years later.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. So let's do it then. Let's give our rankings out at this point. I'll let you guys know. We both rated Raiders of the Lost Ark at 11. We always rank things 1 to 11 here on PLD Products, by the way, because we always turn it up to 11. So out of 11, we both gave Raiders 11. We both gave Temple of Doom 10.5. We both gave Last Crusade another perfect 11. PJ gave Crystal Skull 10.5. I gave it a 10. Dial of Destiny, PJ. What's your rating on it?
I think you're going to be absolutely shocked by this.
Oh, well, I probably will be. Yeah.
It's as good as Crystal Skull. It's as good as Temple of Doom.
Okay.
It's a 10.5, man. This is arguably maybe the most consistent franchise in Lucasfilm, in modern day blockbusters, outside of maybe John Wick. This franchise is continuing to be this strong all the time. And the fact that it ends on Mission Impossible 2 exists.
I know. I agree. But some people look at Mission Impossible 2 like to look at.
Yeah, that's fine, but I can't just look past it. I'm sorry. I'm not going to. There's no world where I'm going to be revisionist about Mission Impossible 2.
I'm saying, but some people look at Crystal Skull like you look at MI2.
I know, and they're allowed to do whatever they want to do. I just.
Okay, no, but no, it is consistent. 10.5. That's a good score.
10.5. It just makes sense to me.
Okay, that's fair. I struggled with my point value for this. Like, it's one of those things I almost want to give a 2 score to. Like, I think at the end, I settle on 9.5.
Okay.
Because I do, like, it's kind of weird because I argue against the trolls. At the same time, I think I like the Spielbergian feel that is a little bit missing in this film. This is a great film, but as far as the Indiana Jones franchise goes, I probably like the other ones better. Even if this has some of my favorite moments, I think it's just the overall tone. I separate this film from the rest of them a lot more for the franchise. I feel like it fits, but it's also kind of like a little different feel. I think I have to shoot it down to the Spielbergian feel that it's kind of missing. Again, though, 9.5, that's just 0.5 under Crystal Skull for me. That's the only reason why. So at the end of the day, it's still a solid, great, wonderful franchise edition. And I'm really glad it happened. It's not like I'm going to skip it when I do an Indiana Jones marathon at all or anything like that. It is a phenomenal way to end the story. It is a perfectly told story for what it has set out to do. Yeah, that's all I got to say. Bravo, Mangold. Bravo, Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
And bravo, by the way, we didn't really mention bravo, John Williams. Once again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll say this. The first watch through, I actually didn't notice a lot of the score, and I felt like the score was missing from the movie. And I had like a weird moment where we walked out and I was like, I felt like the score wasn't nearly as prevalent as I anticipated it being. But the second time through, it really came through. But I think it was because I was so focused on visually, like taking
Right.
everything in and seeing the characters. But then I think also is that I almost took for granted how good Williams is with his music,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that I just didn't notice that it was there. It was, and it
Right.
wasn't as muted as I thought it was.
No, I get that. I listened to the score almost immediately after I got out because I love the score so much. Again, I love the score. John Williams can do no wrong, and I feel bad sometimes we forget to talk about him because you just expect greatness, and he
Yeah.
delivers greatness every time, pretty much. But well, I think that's gonna wrap us up here then, BJ. So wow, exciting franchise for us. I'm glad we got through that one. Next time we are going to start the one of the franchises you just mentioned. We're going to do John Wick
Yeah,
1
I'm
through
very
4.
excited about these.
I am very excited as well. Although it's kind of strange because I just rewatched these films like not too long ago and build up to 4. Now I'm gonna have to watch them again. So it's gonna be interesting seeing them
Oh, I'm
again
so
so
sorry that
recently.
you're gonna have to watch the John Wick movies again.
I know it's so awful, right?
So
We're
terrible.
we're choosing great franchises, and that's going to be the issue. Or we're choosing a lot of consistently good franchises, which I know is to your benefit because you don't like trashy movies.
I really
Um,
don't.
I'm excited about this. I'm very excited about this. Where can the folks find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter and Threads and Instagram at PJ_Campbell for as long as Twitter still exists. And you can find me here hanging out doing this thing, getting ready to talk the John Wick films.
There you go. There you go. One last thing with the rankings as we do this is the finish of the franchise. My average ranking was 10.4. Your average ranking was 10.7. Our average Indiana Jones films is 10.5 out of 11. That's pretty fucking consistent.
Yeah.
So you can find me at Paul_Denuzio on Twitter. You can find me PLD Projects on Threads. I'm getting into that as well. Feel like that one's the one that's going to last as the Twitter alternative because it has the back of Instagram and everything else. And a lot of people did join up. You can find me all over this channel. I get besides Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film every other week, I do Holy Snokes, Star Wars podcast, which is returning this Thursday. We do Mission Impossible Declassified, our episode. We're about to go record that with Maddie, our episode on Dead Reckoning Part 1, which I got to see yesterday. And also I do Crown Jewels and The Journey Through Queen. I do review with Lego. We talk about the V franchise. And the Harris-Tons will be coming this month, the end of this month. I believe it's the 27th. But yeah, and if this is your first time here, please click that like, click that subscribe. Let us know what you think. Tell us what you want to hear more of. Tell us a franchise you want to see us cover. I mean, we have scheduled out for a while, but we're always looking for new franchises to sink our teeth into. Don't promise anything, but yeah, we're excited about it. And if you
I
want to
really
help out,
am.
if you want to help out even further, patreon.com/PLD projects. We can help join Austin Cadell, Jeremiah Morris, Maddie Kearns, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman. Really appreciate you guys. Couldn't do it without you. Thanks for keeping the lights on. And yeah, any last words? Are we good?
No, I think that's it, man. I'm just glad we got to sit down and talk all things indie. It's a lot of fun, you know. I really enjoyed revisiting this franchise and kind of sharing my love for it with the world.
Yeah.
I think that I've talked about it before. Back to the Future is my favorite movie of all time, but I really do think that indie is my favorite franchise. There's just something that I'm so drawn to over these movies, over the television show, over the comics, like the games. The indie as a character and as a franchise has always been such a big part of my life, and so it's been really interesting to go back and do this and sit with them and talk with them and really pull them apart in the way that we were doing. And it's so funny because we've shouted them out before, but the Force Center guys were doing the Indiana Jones and the Perilous podcast, Ken Knapsack and Joseph Scrimshaw, and it was very funny, like listening to theirs after we would record ours, and so much of how they were seeing things and talking about things were the way that we were seeing things and talking about things. And so it was kind of nice to see that we weren't really alone in some of the ways that we were taking some of this out. And even if I didn't necessarily agree with certain things, it was like, but I understood where they were coming from. And so it's been a very interesting journey doing this with you, and then seeing our other friends also do it at the same time in their own way, and us revisiting that too. So yeah, it's been a journey, man, but it's been fun, and I'm really glad we got to do it.
This was a no-brainer. Obviously, when we started this podcast, this is one of those franchises we knew we're definitively going to do because we both love this franchise so much anyway. But yeah, I feel the same way. I feel the same way. I'm glad we got to it. I'm glad it was done at the right time as we led up to the new movie. And who knows? Who knows? Maybe there'll be another one in the future. You never can tell. I never say never at this point. That's what I've come to say about life in general. But at least until then, until next time, stay mediocre, people. Never underestimate the power of mediocrity. Bye.
Peace.